way, Jose.
Red Hot Gotsy, come subscribe, come subscribe, come subscribe, come subscribe.
No way.
Red Hot Gotsy. Alright, so today I am talking about Cobra Kai again, and today I'm going to be talking about nerfing in Cobra Kai. Now, when it comes to nerfing, I feel like fundamentally people do not understand the conceptualization of nerfing and why it happens in the show, and sometimes they misconstrue certain elements of the show to be nerfing when a character just wins or loses, and when a character is just not at their best because mentally they're just not there, or maybe they're injured to some degree. And I feel like people just don't understand the times when it happens and when it doesn't happen. So let's just get into it. I just want to get into the intricacies of it. Now, when you look up the definition of nerfing, it basically means to make something less effective or useful. Now, this could apply to video games or movies or TV shows in general, but what I want to focus on are specifically fighting shows like Cobra Kai, where a character can get weakened or injured or not mentally be there in the right headspace to win, and that causes them to lose. I think a good way I can do this is by going over some of the arguments that people use for specific reasons why they feel the way they feel, and then I'll go over some of the instances in the actual show where, nerfing either applies or it doesn't apply. Now, a lot of people will make arguments like, well, he was nerfed and that's why he lost, but if he wasn't nerfed, my character would win. Now, usually these instances are when it's your favorite character or a character that you think is really strong, and so you boast this character to be like the strongest character in the show, or a character that would never lose if they weren't in this position, and that's why you would say that. Now, a good example of a character actually being nerfed is Johnny in episode 1 of season 1. Now, Johnny actually fought against Kyler and his goons to defend Miguel, and that's basically how the show started. But people, and I've heard a couple people say this, not like a ton of people, but I just had to address it just in case anyone actually was curious about this, in my opinions on it. I think fundamentally Johnny was heavily nerfed in this episode, only because, he did actually scrap, like, Kyler was scrapping decently with Johnny. The problem is Johnny was like super drunk and he wasn't really focused, and it's been years since Johnny has actually focused and locked in and actually trained a lot in karate to begin with, because of how the trajectory of his life. So he hasn't really had the time to hone in his skills, but even so, he low-key does mop the floor with Kyler anyway and his goons. I know there were a couple people who actually tried to make the argument that Kyler is sensei level in season 1 just because he scrapped with Johnny with his, again, goons. But the problem is, once he fights Miguel, he actually shows his true power level, which is non-existent. A good example of a character being technically nerfed or injured in a fight is Robbie in season 1, because Robbie in season 1 technically is stronger than Miguel in season 1, based on scaling and based on how the fight actually went, based on how Robbie's defense was, and he actually was defending most of Miguel's attacks before and even after he got injured. Also, the two-legged kick he did against Miguel shows his skill level as well. Now, the thing is about this fight is the point behind it is to basically show how toxic Kreese's form of Cobra Kai is, with the whole strike first, strike hard, no mercy, that crap. The problem is some people use this fight as an argument to say that Miguel is actually stronger than Robbie in season 1. The problem is it doesn't make sense, because you see him struggling heavily against Robbie even when he is injured. Also, I do not want to hear an argument like, well, Daniel in Karate Kid 1 was able to fight through it and he used the crane kick. No, I do not want to hear that, because not only does Miguel know the crane kick, he knows how to dodge it, but Robbie is in a different position because it's his arm, his shoulder specifically, and that's different from your leg, because you can do a lot with like even though, again, your leg being injured is really bad, I feel like you not being able to throw punches or at least block with his arms, because he's only able to block with one arm and he's mainly defense based, so that's actually really bad for Robbie specifically. Daniel is also, a Miyagi-Do student, but he learned a crane kick and he knows how to do it, and Johnny did not know how to block it, so that was very good. And honestly, he was lucky in that position, but it was one of those instances where even with Daniel, he got nerfed by him being injured unrightfully, and you can consider that a nerf. But with Robbie, again, his fighting style is different, even with Miyagi-Do, so it doesn't really count. It's not really a good example of something he should have done. So I would still say Miguel is significantly weaker than Robbie, and therefore that is a nerf on Robbie's part. Now, season 2 is actually antithetical to season 1 in certain aspects, because you actually see the intricacies of some of the scaling in this season, and that's why it's one of my favorites, because you actually get to see more characters fight each other that you wouldn't expect them to fight, and they fight each other when they're focused for the most part, and it shows like their actual true power level. So a lot of the scaling that people actually like are from like season 2, 4, and 5, and recently people have liked a lot of season 6, but I think season 6 scaling is a lot more flimsy than like 2 and 4. Now, when Miguel fights Robbie in season 2, they're both at their strongest at the end of the season. Some people may make the argument that Robbie is nerfed because mentally he's enraged because he's been cheated on by Sam, because, you know, Sam kissed Miguel. But honestly, I don't think it necessarily matters, because even when you see both of them fight in season 5, you can see a even stronger version of Robbie cannot beat Miguel, because fundamentally he's just not stronger than Miguel. They're both relative, and that's why I'll say, like, even in season 6 people were saying Miguel's weak or something like that, trying to just glazing Robbie for no apparent reason. And it's like, honestly, like, I get it's his season, or at least his portion of the season, but that does not mean that he's like infinitely stronger than characters who have lost or haven't really had the chance to fight specific characters. Also, Axel is yet to be defeated, so when it comes to that, I feel like Miguel, they're setting up Miguel to be the one to defeat Axel in the future once part 3 comes out. And honestly, I'd be fine with that as long as the show writes it properly. And if it's like, a lot of people have already theorized that, you know, he's gonna join Cobra Kai again, Johnny's gonna take it over, yada yada yada. But not getting into the theories too much, I do think that that is a possibility. So saying that Miguel is infinitely weaker than Robbie just does not work. Now, if Robbie does actually win, then I'll give him the credit that he deserves. But for now, I think fundamentally they're relative. But going back to what I was saying, I think Robbie is one of those characters, just like Miguel, to where, like, if he's in the right mindset, he will win. But if he isn't, there's a potential that he could lose badly. And, you know, a lot of people, again, use this for most of Robbie's fights and some of Miguel's fights, when he does either lose or gets injured or doesn't really get his way in some sort of way. Like, when it comes to Robbie losing in season 2, again, it's mentality. He's enraged, and he's a Miyagi-Do student, so therefore he is weakened or nerfed or whatever. In season 1 is his shoulder. In season 3, you could argue, again, he's learning more Cobra Kai, and he's not really used to it. So since he's enraged and he's using his anger, he's probably, some people can make the argument that he's weaker than most of season 2. With season 4, you could argue he's more balanced, because he's learning, he still knows Miyagi-Do. He's able to defeat Cobra Kai students because he's balanced and more focused. But he's learning more Cobra Kai, so he has like a mixture of it. But because he knows more Miyagi-Do and he uses a lot of Cobra Kai in season 4, it kind of like, he doesn't really know how to switch styles that well. Not like Hawk, and that's why he won, and not like Miguel, who was on par with him. When it comes to Miguel, you could actually make the argument that being enraged actually makes him stronger. So when he's at his strongest is like seasons 2 and 5, and I got 6 currently. But some people will say, like, for example, in season 4, when he was re-injured, and, you know, the back injury and everything, you really get to see that, you know, certain things, if they happen suddenly and stuff like that, that can actually affect your performance. And honestly, if he did step back on the mat, it probably would have happened again, or at least it would have messed him up, like, mentally. He would have lost anyway. This is a great example of mentality actually being the number one key as to whether you actually win the fight or lose the fight. The same thing is with Robbie. Both Miguel and Robbie were not locked in this season. Robbie was still angry about his father, about Miguel, and Sam, and Daniel, basically everyone, to some degree. And Hawk basically humbled him in that season, in that moment, because he was the only one that was actually locked in. And he actually showed that Robbie was not fit to be Cobra Kai. And, you know, Robbie as a Miyagi-Do student is a lot stronger, especially, again, when you see the evidence of him in episode 1 literally soloing all of the Cobra Kai students with just Miyagi-Do. Also, you can make the argument that Kenny distracting Robbie was the reason that he lost to begin with. Now, you know, people go back and forth when it comes to that all the time, but the point of it was to basically show that, you know, teaching a student is a lot harder than it actually looks, and that sometimes you make mistakes, and, you know, your mistakes, like Daniel said, do not define you. It's about what you do afterwards that matters. And Robbie realizes that, and that's why he snaps out of it in season 5. But that's the thing that really nerfed him in that moment, and that's what really screwed him over. And that's why Hawk actually ended up winning. Now the thing is, people could say like, well, why didn't Robbie just Robbie losing in that moment shows that he was nerfed because of Kenny. But if Robbie was significantly stronger, like miles stronger than Hawk, then he would have just gotten the point anyway, instead of just struggling and then losing to Hawk afterwards. Also, people usually like to talk about amps, like you get a rage amp or a resolve amp or like an amp from a specific person. Like for example, Robbie recently got like something called like a Tory amp, where if Tory is in the vicinity of Robbie, and this sounds really stupid, then he's going to get a power up basically, because it's somebody that he loves or cares about and stuff like that. So obviously it doesn't sound that bad in concept, but it kind of feels very much like anime, like the power of friendship kind of thing. And I don't like Cobra Kai like using mentality as like a power up or like a huge degrading factor in fights. And a lot of the times, especially a good example of this is Robbie in season 6 part 2, because like he ends up showing that he cannot perform unless somebody like is pushing him to. Like for example, if Miguel is telling him, oh, you have to lock in and you can't keep selling, and he has to constantly reassure him that he deserves to be captain and that he should be trying harder. That's what he has to do. Or if Tori's around, he just looks at Tori and then instantly gets a power up and then wins. It just feels too like the show cannot give Robbie an interesting way to be Quan, so it basically just gives him a power up in order to win. But the thing is, it's very antithetical to Karate Kid 1, where Daniel didn't necessarily just need like, oh, my friends and family they want me to win, so I need to win. Or it wasn't like anything like that. It was more so, obviously he needed to be focused and determined in that moment, but it was more so like, okay, I have to use a specific technique and use it correctly because I am injured, so technically that is a nerf. But and not just, it's not just, oh, my friends and family and Allie need me to do this, but I need to do it in a specific way because of my the ramifications of how this fight has gone on. Because he only has one leg, he has to do it at the right time, and he only has one shot at doing this. And throughout a lot of this film, he was practicing how to use the crane kick in order to use it at the end of the film when he needed it most against Johnny. Another instance of nerfing is basically when Miguel was kicked off the railing, and throughout all of season 3 he was infinitely nerfed, and that's probably the biggest example of a nerf in the entire show, because literally like half of his skill was just like cut in half because of the fact that he was injured and he had to he was put in a freaking wheelchair. So it's like, obviously he's not going to be the same way he was in season 2, and a lot of people are devastated about that when it happened, because of just how powerful Miguel was and how cool he was in season 2. And it just like, the question that was really going through people's minds was, if Miguel never got that injury, how powerful would he be in season 6 right now? And honestly, I feel like he would be significantly stronger than basically every single teen character or student that's not a sensei in the entire show. If you really think about it, Miguel was actually still learning Cobra Kai, and even with Cobra Kai, he was able to defeat Robbie with me when he was using Miyagi-Do. And again, I sort of like debated whether Robbie was even nerfed to begin with in season 2, but let's just say he was. Miguel was still training a lot longer than Robbie was, and in jail, like if he was sent to jail for some other reason, then he would even get more experience while Robbie was occupied. Now let's say he didn't, because obviously he didn't kick him off the railing. Robbie was still training under, like his situation with Daniel was still kind of screwed up, so he would have stopped training with Daniel for a little bit of time, and maybe Daniel would have apologized later on. But either way, it's like he doesn't have as much experience as Miguel, and he would have fell behind a little bit. So overall, Miguel would be significantly above Robbie, significantly above Hawk, and significantly above the girls and like Dimitri and just basically everybody. Now, again, before anyone says that, I'm not trying to glaze Miguel. I still think he would lose against like Axel and stuff like that in the future if they created that character. If they created Quan, they would make him stronger than Miguel, and they would probably make Miguel fight him instead of Robbie, since he's the strongest character of all the students. And overall, I do think it would be an interesting fight seeing Miguel actually fight Quan. Now obviously we're not going to see that because he's, you know, dead, but I just think the trajectory of the show would change significantly if Miguel never got the back injury, which is probably the biggest, again, the biggest nerf in the entire show. Also, I must mention this, he would have won the tournament in season 4 because he's not mentally nerfed by all the stuff that was happening in that season. Unless you want to argue that Johnny would have still said that he loves Robbie when he was drunk and he was like falling asleep or like kind of in a daze. And also Sam and Miguel were having like issues in the relationship. You could honestly argue that Miguel would still be nerfed in that season, but if he wasn't and those things weren't happening, then he would have most definitely won. I guess you can argue that nerfing could exist if a character is just forgotten about. Like, for example, with Hawk, I think Hawk has definitely been forgotten about in the series, and ever since season 4, they really haven't given him the same shine that he had like a long time ago in that season. They've never really given him like that hero moment or that, you know, badass moment or however you want to word it that he deserves. And that's kind of an issue because Hawk has been an OG and he's been here since season 1. Like, he's had some of the best development in the entire show, and the fact that they're really shafting him is disappointing. I didn't want to talk about that too much, even though it is one of the worst instances of nerfing, because, you know, I already made a video about him being trash in season 5, and in season 6 I'm gonna make a season 6 video for Hawk very soon, but I just don't want to talk about that too much right now. That's gonna be it for this video. Comment, subscribe, like, let me know what you think about the whole video. You know, if you have any extra thoughts, you know, maybe I misconstrued something, you know, just left out something, you know, maybe there's another instance of nerfing that I just kind of forgot about, or, you know, I don't know, anything like that. So yeah, just, you know, I just love that y'all are supporting the channel. You know, I'm gonna try to make more videos that aren't Cobra Kai in the future, obviously, but I do want to kind of get these Cobra Kai videos out because I do have a lot of ideas based on season 6 and specifically part 2. I do want to talk about some other stuff as well, and in just like the overall show. I might talk a little bit about Karate Kids 1, 2, and 3 maybe in the future, but for now I do kind of want to just get these Cobra Kai videos out there, and then we'll move on from there. So comment, subscribe, like, let me know what you think of the whole video and, you know, my previous videos, whatever, and I'll see you guys later.
Red Hot Gotsy, come subscribe, like, come subscribe, like, come subscribe, like, come subscribe.